All right, so you open up this image. It's all dark. That's because all the data is compressed into, because the space is dark, so all the data is actually compressed to a really small portion of the histogram. We go to, it's called HistogramTransformation. And I swear I know the alphabet. I have a little shortcut here, again, by clicking and dragging the new instance icon. Right click, set icon identifier, you can name it. And then to get it to, so right now the histogram is not showing anything. That's because we don't have a view selected. So you can click on this drop down and select the image that you want to see, or you can hit this little check mark here. It will, for whatever image you have currently active, then it will show the histogram for that. So to zoom in, oh, come on. Yeah, recording in two different ways is probably pushing this computer a little bit. So yeah, so the histogram, dark pixels are here on the left, medium intensity pixels are in the middle, and high intensity or bright pixels are here on the right. And the height of the peak is how many pixels have that brightness level. So since this is a raw image, everything's down here in the dark part. And you can see that our color channels are not yet aligned, but they will be as we go through this. So in order to see what you're actually dealing with, and this is a big advantage of PixInsight over Photoshop, is you can apply what's called a screen stretch to the image. So this will take a guess at what a nice stretch would look like. And the stretch is basically adjusting that histogram so that instead of all the pixels being in the dark area, more of them are in the middle area, so you can actually see what you're doing. In PixInsight, there's a little, I think when you first started up, this bar is up here sometimes. I move it down here so I can access it easier. There's a little button called STF Auto Stretch, and that will stretch the image for you. You can to apply a screen stretch. And this is not actually changing any data in the image. It's just for your viewing purposes. The other way to get to that is go to Processes, All Processes, and go to Screen Transfer Function. And you can hit the little nuclear button and it will do the same thing. Now, as you can see, it's doing, like we saw in the histogram, the color channels are not aligned. So this image looks really green. The way around that is two ways. One, if you use this button here, if you press Control click, it will take a guess at aligning the color channels for you so that you can actually see what's going on. Over here on Screen Transfer Function, if you unlink, so have this button not be lit up, if you unlink the color channels, then it will do the same thing. So two different ways to go about that. So yeah, so this is kind of again, the auto screen stretch is just so that we can see what's going on before we actually stretch the image, which you can't do in Photoshop. You have to stretch the image basically first. And there's a lot of processing you can do before you stretch the image that will make a better quality product at the end if you do it pre-stretch as opposed to post-stretch. All right, so so this is an already stacked and already integrated image that I got from Andrea. So the first step, once you have your data all stacked, and the previous video I did shows how to do that whole process, but we're not going to go over that today. First thing is to crop it, because as you can see, we can see some of the line. We can see a line here where sometime while the data was being taken, the telescope was sitting in a slightly different spot, looking at the target. Yeah. So not all the images are in the exact same place. And this will happen to you pretty much no matter what. There's always some small lift and stuff like that. It's usually not, yeah. It can be not this big if you leave your camera on and don't take it off. But if you take your camera on and off, sometimes that shift can be pretty large. And
I don't want to lose that star. I love that star.
Yeah, I know, but unfortunately, it's in the overlap area. So
yeah.
So we're going to use a process called DynamicCrop. And that's, so like there's all these categories of processes, but I find it easier because like it's hard to know like, okay, which one of these is dynamic crop in? It's easier just to go to all processes and search for it by name. So dynamic crop is the name of the process. And again, I have saved a copy of it to my screen here, even though this, I don't have settings here that I keep the same between images. I have a copy of it here just so it's easier to access. So what this does, it's kind of similar to Photoshop, where you select the area, but instead of doing a click and drag, you are adjusting this boundary box here. So I definitely want to bring it down below that line of overlap here. And you always, and even if you don't really see any edge effects, it's good to pull the edges of the image over a couple of pixels. Cut those out because there's usually a couple of pixels on the edge that have like weird colors or have registration errors and stuff like that. So you want to cut those out. Now, if you are doing multi-channel data, so say you have a monochrome camera and you're doing red, green, and blue, or you want to apply this same crop to another image, another version of this image, you have to create the new instance before you hit the check button. This is really important. So if you want to take this and apply it to another image, or you want to save it, which is something that I like to do, I right click and hit save, save selected icons. And I have a folder called processes. Come on. And the processes folder is where I save processes that you can't, that are really hard to replicate exactly if you want to go back and change things. So crop is going to have an exact size that I want to be able to save. So I'm going to save this out. Sometimes I have to do it twice. There we go. Back to here, processes. I'm going to call it crop. And it saves it as a PixInsight process file so that you can re-import it and apply it to the image if you want to go back and start all over. All right, so now I've got the set and saved, I'm going to apply it. And it has cropped our image. Now, so if you want to resize this window so it's exact, instead of doing it yourself, you can zoom into like the size that you want, and there's a little button here that resizes the window to fit the view. Just a little nice, handy shortcut. Because remember, the actual image data, the channels are not aligned, and we have this kind of green mess. And that's very common for one-shot color cameras, because remember, there's 2 green pixels for every red and blue pixel. So green is going to dominate even though there's not really any green actually here, you know. All right, so our next step is dynamic background extraction. Now, this process alone makes PixInsight worth the money, in my opinion. This is an extremely powerful process for removing background gradients, background light, and it also happens to kind of have a first pass at balancing the colors. So that can be found under processes, all processes, dynamic background extraction, right here. Now I'm going to open up one that I already have settings set for, but this is the screen that it starts out with. And in order to activate this, because as you can see, it's all gray, you have to hit the reset button with the image you want to apply it to activated. Okay. Yeah, that's kind of a weird little trippy thing. So I'm going to open up one that I've already got a bunch of settings set that I like. So there's a lot of stuff going on here, and there's a lot of stuff you can play with, and I've played with some of it and don't always really notice a difference. But yeah, this is one place to kind of play with stuff. And there's a lot of different schools of thought on how to apply dynamic background extraction. A lot of it depends on the type of data you have and just what your personality type is, I guess. I don't know. Some people swear by many small samples, and some people swear by fewer large samples, and both camps produce awesome images. So who knows? What
I do, I never change it. So is that the default?
No, so this is settings that I've used. So I'm going to step through the ones that
Okay.
I have changed away from default.
Okay.
So let's see. Yeah, okay. So what dynamic background extraction does is you create a bunch of sample points across the image, and it uses those sample points to estimate the gradients and the background, and then it will subtract or divide that background out depending on what type you use. And again, there's multiple camps of people who think that subtraction is better and think that division is better. I don't really notice the difference most of the time. So yeah, so first of all, the first set of settings that is different from default is in this model parameters here. And I think the tolerance is default 1.5, the shadows relaxation is default 3, and I set the smoothing factor to 0.25, and that's a recommendation from when I first learned PixInsight from light vortex astronomy. There's some different settings you can set here depending on what kinds of stuff you want to do. And so PixInsight, their external documentation is not really well fleshed out yet. They have a lot of kind of tooltip documentation. So if you hover over a box for any setting, it will give you a usually pretty jargony description of what that does, but will also sometimes say, like, if you raise it, this will happen. If you lower it, this will happen. So it can kind of give you an idea of what direction to go with these settings. So I'm going to start with these settings here and potentially mess with them a little bit. Under sample generation, this is where you're setting the size and the number of samples to put in your image that we're going to go adjust. So I've recently learned that larger samples, I think, do produce better results. And the sample size, I can use bigger samples when there's not as many stars in the image. Otherwise, I have to use smaller samples. So for this one, I'm going to set it to 20 and probably like 8 samples per row, and I hit generate.
Okay.
So it takes kind of a guess at where the object is based on the brightness of the image, and will avoid putting, because you basically, you don't want sample points that are on the object itself. And then you don't want sample points on top of stars. So at this point, now that I've generated this, I'm actually going to go through and check each point to make sure there's it's not sitting on a star. Now, if you decide that the samples are too big and you want to change their size, too big or too small, if you change the size, make sure you hit resize all and not generate, because if you moved these points around, hitting generate will undo all of your hard work. It makes a new set of points. So if you change like default sample radius or any of these settings here, hit resize, not generate, or else you're going to be sad. So now I'm going to go and check and kind of move these points off of stars. And this is probably the most hands-on, time-consuming part of PixInsight. And when I post this video up on YouTube, I'm just going to speed this section up, probably.
Yeah. Fast forward.
Yeah, but while I go through this kind of tedious process, now there is a process called automatic background extraction, which it operates on a bit of a different operating principle, but honestly, I don't get good results with it. I never do, so I kind of stopped using it.
I was wondering about that. I'm like, I don't know. It kind of reminds me of like the auto stretch, where it's like it's not going to be a perfect stretch.
Yeah. And I guess for a quick and dirty, it can work, but I find it tends to leave weird gradients behind, or it kind of puts dark rings around my galaxies and stuff like that. So yeah, I quit using it and just kind of hand jam it this way. Yeah, so I've gone around and moved all the points so that they're avoiding stars.
That didn't take so long. It did go fast. Yeah.
So in order to save like where all these points are, in case you want to go back and redo this with different settings, this is the good time to pull off that new instance icon and save. Actually, I'm going to change a few more things before I actually save it out, but save it as DBE in your processes folder. That way you can go back and repeat it with different settings if you want, without having to go through and move every single point. All right. So about the tolerance, you may have, especially if you're imaging in the city, you're probably going to have some really strong gradients. And you could have some light in the image where your target is not, but then dynamic background extraction says, oh, this is too far outside of the tolerance range, is probably target, and we don't want that. So we're going to ignore those points. And those boxes, those sample boxes will turn red if it's going to ignore them. So for example, if I turn this down to like 0.5 and hit resize all, we lose a couple down here in the darker areas in the corners. But I want that because I want to kind of apply some flattening to this image. So I'm going to raise that tolerance back up to 1. And okay, so they're back to being gray again. Oh, my kitty has come to join us.
Oh, which one?
Orion.
Oh.
Yeah, can't see him in the video right now.
Oh, he's handsome boy.
Yeah, and
oh, looking outside. Oh, there's your tower. Is that your house?
Yeah, I got this for them because they just, with my house being so empty, they had nowhere to like exist, you know?
Yeah, they're like, where do we go?
Like,
air mattress.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Oh, he's gonna come across my computer.
Yeah, he wants to be involved. Like, let me show you. Use dynamic background extraction, Orion.
So finally, down here in target image correction, you can select, you're gonna need to select subtraction or division. I tend to get results I like better with subtraction, but definitely try both and see what you like. And you may not really notice the difference until much further along in the processing process. So that can be part of your experimentation. I leave all these unchecked. And once I like all my settings, then I hit execute and it creates a new image since I don't have replace target image selected.
Yeah.
With the background extracted. So first, before I unveil this, let me show you what the background looks like. So you can see it's actually, it subtracted some stuff, but it's nothing too wild and crazy. This is kind of a first pass at dynamic background extraction.
Okay.
And here it is.
I've had some, whoa, it made a huge difference.
Yes.
Wow.
And now you'll notice if I hit shift click so that it links the color channels again, there's a lot less green than there was because it removed a lot of it.
Nice. That's really great.
Yeah. So this is a good first pass at flattening the image, removing background, aligning the color channels a little more. And yeah, super powerful piece of software here. So I'm going to create a new instance so I can save the settings in case I want to go back and do this with different things. Come on. Oh, my apples are all turning brown. I better eat them.
Your apples. Keep eating. You're a wizard, Molly. That's what Amber says.
So the next step here is one of my other favorite processes that makes PixInsight worth all the money. Is photometric color calibration. Is an
I've never heard of this.
Cool process. So what this does is instead of, so like if you run color calibration or background neutralization, or if you run color calibration like in Photoshop and stuff, it estimates what the color balance between red, green, and blue should be based on like an area of sky that you say, okay, this is an empty area of sky, and then against the whole image. And it does some math and kind of estimates what the correct color balance should be. The photometric color calibration is far more scientific. What it does is you give it, and we'll do this in a second, you give it the coordinates of like approximately where the center of the image is. It can be really like, as long as the coordinates you give are somewhere in the image, it'll figure it out. You give it your telescope's focal length and pixel size. And this is so that it can plate solve your image and figure out what part of the sky it's looking in. And then it does a lookup in one of several star databases. And based on that plate solve, determines, finds a star in the image that is a sun type star as far as its color spectrum goes, a G2V type star, which means it's putting out about the same color spectrum as our sun. And it uses that star as the white reference for the image. and it calibrates the 3 color channels based on how it would appear to us with our sun evolved eyes, basically. So it's about as accurate as you can get. Okay. I find it does a pretty good job of applying realistic looking color corrections to the image. So first, we're going to search coordinates. Now you can enter them yourself, especially if it's something like a comet where that comet's coordinates change every 10 seconds. But if it's a static object, you can actually just do a search and search for it. And I might have to go get the catalog number for it, but it also has a dictionary of common names. Okay, so
it's IC410.
Thank you,
I believe.
Here it is.
Yeah, okay.
You can also acquire it from the image, although I'm trying to acquire it from my image and I'm not acquiring it. So
since you saved it as a TIFF, that data is not saved.
Oh, because it's a TIFF. Okay.
Yeah. In the FIT file, your original FITS file, it'll be there, but there's no a TIFF is like a common image format for regular images, so there's no metadata slots for things like right ascension and declination. So when I go through PixInsight, I actually save all my images as PixInsight's native XISF format.
Okay.
I mean, it's specific to PixInsight, but it stores way more metadata than any other format. It'll even store the image's whole editing history if you let it.
Wow.
So yes, it's a very powerful format. And then you can always import it into PixInsight and save it as a TIFF or a JPEG if you're looking to share it with non-PixInsight users or put it on the internet. So, but yeah, keeping it in the PixInsight format after you do all your stacking and calibration and stuff will preserve all the metadata that was in the FITS file and new metadata added, including like the plate solve solution in PixInsight. All right, so we've got the coordinates. Andrea, what's the focal length of your telescope?
540 millimeters.
Okay. And do you know your pixel size offhand?
3.76.
Perfect. All right. And these don't have to be exact, but this should be close because then the plate solver can do its job better.
I just did it on my own computer and it actually worked because sometimes this doesn't work, as you know.
Yeah, I've been having troubles with it with my CCD images lately. So I don't know what's been going on with that. But
yeah, me too.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I don't remember if this is done in the default settings or not, but I turn on background neutralization and I think these are the default settings for it.
Do you change the upper limit for background neutralization?
No, I don't. I've been pretty satisfied with the settings that it has here. But that's another thing that one can play around with and definitely mess around with it. All right, I hit apply. And first thing it's going to do is it's going to download the catalog data for that patch of sky so that it can do its plate solving. So yeah, you need an internet connection to run this process. So
plain white balance done.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So now one thing to note about this is that it still has your previous screen stretch applied to it. And if I reapply the new screen stretch, you'll see it'll kind of turn back to the colors that it had. But remember, this is a screen stretch. So
yeah, right.
But you still have it unlinked, right?
Yeah, so this is unlinked and this is linked. So you can see.
I like it better unlinked. Will we keep it unlinked, or do we have to link at some point?
Well, again, the screen stretch, it's not actually changing the data. So when we go to stretch it, we will adjust the colors as our eyes see fit.
Okay.
All right. I can't wait.
Good. It's looking so much cleaner though. I love this.
Yeah. And photometric color calibration also sometimes does some background subtraction along with it. So the image might look kind of weird and dark until you hit that screen transfer function button again. All right, so we can close photometric color calibration, and now we have our our pretty picture. And if we go look in the histogram, again, hit that check mark so that it's tracking this image and zoom in, you will see our color channels are now aligned.
Ooh, wow.
When they're aligned, like when the peaks are aligned, that's generally when the colors are balanced correctly to our white reference vision of the sun.
Okay.
All right. So next so this image is not particularly noisy, actually. If I zoom in.
No, it's not. Like,
Not really much noise, but we're going to take a first pass at some denoising here before we do this.
Okay.
So
yeah, I bet it's going to do great.
Yeah, this image has come out quite nicely. So first thing I'm going to, so one technique that I use that I learned on Light Vortex that I really like is there's a process called MultiscaleLinearTransform that is extremely powerful. You can use it for denoising and for sharpening. And if you've ever used Registacks and done their wavelet deconvolution, it's a lot like that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a mask, because as you can see in the bright areas are less noisy because they have better signal to noise ratio. The dark areas are more noisy because there has a much lower signal to noise ratio since there's less signal. So I'm going to create a mask to protect the bright areas because I don't want to blur the detail. But I don't mind blurring the background because there's no detail there I'm trying to preserve. So there's a button up here called Extract CIE-L Component. That's going to extract the luminance channel, which is again an unstretched image. Now masks have to be stretched. They don't really work if they're linear, if they're non-stretched. But there's a quick and dirty way to stretch for masks. And to do that, you open ScreenTransferFunction and HistogramTransformation. In ScreenTransferFunction, hit that auto stretch button and it will calculate the automatic stretch. And then take that new instance button that we used earlier to create a process icon, and you're going to click and drag it onto the lower bar of HistogramTransformation. And it's going to copy that screen stretch into this HistogramTransformation process. Then remove the ScreenTransferFunction from the image and apply the action. We have now manipulated the pixel data. The image is now stretched. So if I track this image, you can see that now we have a spread out histogram instead of a very condensed dark histogram.
Okay.
This image is now stretched. Another thing I like to do for this particular mask that I'm going to use for denoising is I like to clip the blacks because I want to especially attack the dark areas of the image that are the noisiest. There's a button here next to shadows. It says auto clip shadows. And you have to have you have to be tracking this image so you have the histogram up, and it will just clip off the bottom part of the histogram and just darken the image a bit.
Okay.
That way the mask has very little protection over the dark areas that we want to denoise. I'm going to minimize that, and this is now our mask for this image. What a mask does is, if you have a mask applied, PixInsight will apply whatever process you're applying to it only to the unmasked areas. And that masking is not just a binary mask. It kind of goes over a range of like apply more here or less there. And the way that you can see that is up here. So I can't remember if this mask panel loads automatically or if you have to go to view and see it. But if you go to mask and hit select mask, we have to click on the image that you want to apply the mask to, and then select the mask, which is our L here. And for this process, we're going to invert it. And the red areas are protected, and the less red areas are the areas that we're going to attack with the denoising.
Attack.
That is specifically a word that Adam Block uses that I have picked up.
Attack! Get that noise.
Now, if you go to mask and invert the mask, now you're protecting the background more, and there's less protection on the bright areas, so the stars. And there's places where you would want to use this type of mask, but not for the denoising that we're wanting to do, because we want to denoise the background and not denoise as much the target. So
Right.
back to mask, invert. Now you can hide the mask, so you can actually, you know, instead of seeing all this red and stuff here, you know, we want to see the actual image. If you go to mask and show mask, or you can use these keyboard shortcuts here that are listed, then the mask is still there, but you don't see it. And the way that you know the mask is there is that this tab here with the image name turns orange.
Okay.
Okay. So the mask is still there. And now I'm going to open up MultiscaleLinearTransform. And when you originally open this process, it's going to have these settings up with these different layers and the Starless transform algorithm selected and these other settings set. What you want to do is, and this I ripped straight from Light Vortex Astronomy. I use the exact settings that they have on their website because I find it works really nicely. So I use Starless transform for the algorithm, dyadic instead of linear. This is how it calculates the wavelets. So what this is doing is, so there's different layers, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can actually have a lot more layers than that. And this is the pixel scale upon which this process is going to occur, the blurring or sharpening of pixels. So the first layer is 1 by 1, so single pixel layer. And because a lot of noise is at this layer, because you know, noise it varies from one pixel to the next, right? So you take this detail layer box, set the bias to 0. I honestly don't entirely know what a lot of these settings are for, but they do have little descriptions here. Set the threshold to 3. Now the amount is it's kind of like, you know how in Photoshop you can set the opacity between 2 layers, and it's kind of like that. So this will combine the original image and the new image 50% of each. So it kind of lessens the effect of it so that you don't just have like an image that's completely smooth and kind of fake looking.
Okay.
Layer 2 is 2 by 2 pixel features. And you know, you can see that there's kind of some noise at that level too, some variance in the pixel levels. So in that case, we're doing a threshold of 2 and an amount of 0.5. 3 is 3 by 3. We're doing a threshold of 1. So we're kind of dropping at what point the blurring is actually going to apply, again with an amount of 0.5. And finally, 4 by 4 pixel features, which is probably about the maximum size of any noise variance you're going to have. And we set that threshold even lower, same amount of 0.5. And then the residual is 16 by 16, 8 by 8 blocks. And that you're not going to have noise that's on that kind of scale. So actually, I'm going to stay zoomed in so you can see the effect really awesomely. And now if you want to mess around with these settings and have it go in a faster amount of time, you can create a preview and apply it to the preview and then apply it to the main image once you have the settings that you want. So
I like that.
In this bar, you can select this new preview, and you can click and drag to make a preview box wherever you want. And then now you can apply this process just to this little segment of the image, and it will run a lot faster so that you can go through and mess around with the settings until you get what you like. And then once you have that figured out, apply to the whole image.
Okay.
All right, so let's do this.
Let's do it. So excited. I love getting rid of noise.
I just did it on my preview, and wow, it was crazy good.
What? Oh my God, I'm so excited. Done. I like how it says layer 3, done, 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 done. Oh my God.
So on the keyboard, I'm hitting Control-Z and Control-Y to undo.
Oh
redo,
my
undo,
goodness.
redo.
That is incredible.
And you can see that here in the dark regions, it's a lot more drastic.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And in the light regions, which we have protected, it does a little bit less. That way, you know, because what it's doing is it's blurring. You can't really remove noise, but you can make it less obvious by blurring it. So it blurs less in the brighter regions because of that mask we've applied, so that detail is generally preserved.
Oh, look, there's a tadpole.
Tadpoles.
That's amazing.
Oh, look at that. I saw it there, yeah. Whoa.
All right, so this is one that you'll definitely want to save to your project, because then you don't have to go in and do all that typing all over again.
Yeah.
And so you can click and drag the new instance icon and set the name to, I named mine MLT denoise, or whatever you want. And then when you save your project, you can load up this icon, you can double click it, and it will have all the settings already there for you. All right, now don't forget to remove the mask when you're done, or else any subsequent processes will act in the same way, where they don't really go on the nebula and really go on the background. So to remove the mask, once PixInsight does its thing, go to mask, remove mask, and you can see the tab is no longer orange, and we no longer have a mask.
Oh my gosh, it's beautiful.
Yeah, very happy.
I say it's ready to post now.
Well, of course, it's still like this. You know,
yeah, we still need to we still need to really stretch it. I know.
Now is the time to stretch. Yay.
I know, yay, it's the best part.
All right.
Just
So
the popcorn.
in order to keep some star color, I've started doing another thing recently before I do my regular stretch. So first I'm going to remove the screen stretch by hitting this remove screen transfer function button, or if you open screen transfer function, you can hit the reset button and it will remove it.
Okay.
So first, just a process called arccinch stretch. And arccinch is a trigonometric function. I haven't really dug into exactly what arccinch stretch is doing. A lot of people will call it arcsine stretch, but they don't realize that this is hyperbolic arcsine, which is a trigonometric function that is rather exotic.
Yeah, Adam Block is such a nerd.
Pronounce sign as cinch in the community. So.
Yeah, I do see H. Yeah, I didn't even notice the H there before.
There's an H there.
Yeah.
This can be found under processes, all processes, arccinch stretch. So this is another one that I saved the process icon out for because I have a specific set of settings. Something in the range of 3 to 5 was suggested to me by another imager. Again, this is kind of fuzzy. Set the black point to 0. Yeah, turn off the estimate black point. And I do have protect highlights and use RGB working space checked. So I applied this process 2 or 3 times. Wow. And it just does a weird kind of stretch on the image that times, like the stars, weird stuff. But this will kind of help maintain star color.
Can we do instant replay? That was cool. Oh yeah, look. Wow, that was cool. Did you see that lid? Do you know about this?
Yeah.
That's cool.
How many times do you do it? I don't see much. I like 5 times.
You're not going to see much here. This is just kind of a little pre-step to keep the star color around from when we stretch, but I do it 2 or 3 times. Kind of until just when the nebula just starts to show up. Because if I go too far, then the stars get kind of weird and transparent.
Okay.
So just like 2 times until the nebula just begins to show up 2 or 3 times. And then I go back to our old friend, HistogramTransformation. Now this histogram is not for this image. It's still stuck on the luminance mask that we created earlier. So you can go into the view selector and select this image, or click on the image and hit the little check mark. This is our histogram now.
Wow.
So one of the other buttons down here that's on some of the windows is the real-time preview. So unlike Photoshop, it's not like if I go and adjust this, you see that nothing's actually happening. It won't happen until I hit that apply button. So in order to see what I'm doing, I go to this real-time preview screen.
Okay.
So first, histogram stretching is a multi-step process. You don't want to just try and do it all in one step because you're not going to get an optimal result. So first I'm going to, so you're going to be messing with the midpoint slider and the black point slider. And don't mess with the white point slider because you will saturate your star, you'll clip your stars and then they look weird. It messes with the star profile. So I'm going to take this gray slider and drag it, you know, part of the way. I want to be able to see a little bit of the image. And I hit apply. Now, unlike Photoshop, processes in PixInsight are iterative. So you have to reset this, the histogram transformation every time you make an adjustment.
Yeah, so don't freak out, Katie. You gotta hit the reset.
So next we're going to
freak out first, like, what the fuck? What happened?
We're going to move the black point to the left to, because we want, in the end, we want this histogram to be mostly on the left, but wider.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move this black point over to the right so that our histogram will move left, and then take the gray point and move it to the left, which will widen the histogram peak. And then hit apply, reset. And you might be seeing this jagged line here. It's not bad because it'll get kind of smoothed over at the end. But what this means is that this can happen when you are going above the bit depth of your data. So not a whole lot of red. I know it's weird to say there's not a whole lot of red in this image, but the red, there's a lot of red in this image, but it's dim, basically. It's a dim. Yeah. There's a lot more blue and green because of light pollution, basically.
Yeah.
So again, move the black point up. Now you don't want to move it up too far because you'll start clipping stuff off the bottom. And even though space is black, it's not really black. There's always light somewhere. And of course, since we're imaging from atmosphere, there's always some background light. So if you want your images to not look fake, you're going to leave in some of that background light.
Okay.
I'm going to bring that mid-tone slider kind of up. And you keep doing this until you get an image that you can see.
Okay.
Now you're not doing all of your lightening here. This is kind of a first pass. So I'm going to leave it here and do the rest of my contrast enhancement and color adjustments in curves instead of in histogram.
Okay.
Like I would in Photoshop. Okay, so now our image is stretched. If I hit this remove button, it's not going away. If I hit the stretch button, it will stretch it a little bit, but not a whole lot. So this data is now what we call nonlinear. And if I go back to the histogram, you can see that our histogram is now wider and further to the right instead of being skinny and on the left, which is why we can actually see what's going on here now. All right, so especially for these nebula images, you can see that there's a lot of cool, really dim red nebulosity down here. Now, if I were to go into curves and just, this is a process called CurvesTransformation, I select RGBK, and if I was just to try to bring up that background, you'll see that the stars kind of come up with it, right?
Yeah.
And so does like the whole rest of the background. Well, there's a way we can work on this image without the stars and kind of keep the stars at this level. It's a really cool AI process called StarNet. That's relatively new to being included in PixInsight.
Yay!
So
Andrew and I, like, we love StarNet.
StarNet is awesome. So you go to processes, all processes, StarNet. The very first time you open this, it's going to have little red X's here. And that's because you have to tell it where the libraries are. So to do that, you're going to click on the wrench button. And the nice thing is, PixInsight, when you hit this button, it will take you, well, on when you originally have it, it'll probably take you directly to this correct folder.
Yeah.
If not, you can go look this up online, but it's located in wherever your programs are installed. So usually C, program files.
There's
See, is it
PixInsight.
no. PixInsight, bin.
In, yeah, I forgot after
Sorry,
that.
not bin, library.
Library.
And
Mono, there's mono and there's RGB. Yeah.
yeah, so you select the mono for the grayscale weights file and the RGB for the RGB weights file. And these two files, if you've ever done any machine learning, this is basically the library that contains the machine learning information for the use of this AI type of process. All right, so once you've got those, then they'll have green check marks. Set the stride. I mean, I occasionally will lower this if it's keeping too much of the nebula in the stars side and not separating that very well. And I want to create a star mask because basically this is going to separate the stars from the nebula, and I'm going to recombine it later. So I need that star mask that I can recombine, put the stars back in. And then you hit apply. So what I do is I have a site.
Oh my God.
Real quick, and then I'll finish my line of thought here. So yeah, this is the Starless image, which looks pretty freaking cool when you have nebula images.
Tadpoles really stand out. Look at that.
And here's
That's
the
cool.
stars.
The stars. Wow.
I'll come back to this.
Are those stars, Molly, are those stars RGB stars or is it just a mask?
They are RGB stars.
Okay, because this is what I want to know, how you get your RGB stars back in. Cool.
Yeah, this is exactly how you do it. This star mask is the actual stars, and then I will show you how to add them back into the image. It's
nice. That's awesome.
Okay, so we have our starless image and our star image. So we're going to deal with the starless first. And I oftentimes do save out the starless and the star image so that if I don't like how I did it, I can go back and do it again. Now I am realizing now that we have stretched that there was some area over here that we didn't crop out at the beginning that is also the leftovers from the overlap from the stacking process. But I'm going to wait to crop that until after we put the two images back together.
Right, of course.
But yeah, although I could crop this one and then apply that same crop over here.
Well, that's true.
Actually, I think
tricky.
I can show you how to do it.
I don't have the guts to do that, but I know you know how to do it.
Yeah.
I don't have the guts.
I'm just going to open DynamicCrop. I'm going to pull the edge over to get rid of that region. I'm going to make a new instance before I hit the green check mark. And it's going to give you a warning that you're going to lose your plate solution, but that's no big deal because we can always resolve it later. Now, if you do make that crop before you pull out the new instance, you can always undo or Control Z or hit the button up here and it will undo it. Okay. So fear not.
Yeah, I always have the fear. Like, no.
Yeah, okay. So now that I've got that process here, I'm going to apply it to our star image so that it is equivalently sized when we put them back together.
Oh, it's so cool.
So you can drag over onto here and that's it.
That's it. Yes, it's so easy. I mean, I'm like panicking. It's so good.
Come on, PixInsight. I believe in you.
I believe in you too.
Okay, so now we have the starless image. We can work on it without affecting the stars, like the color of the stars, saturation of the stars, brightness of the stars, stuff like that. Ignore it. You oftentimes have little artifacts left over from where the stars were, like here.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. So when you put the stars back on, you'll have a star there. And
yeah.
Don't clone stamp it out because it'll look funny when you put your stars back on. All right, so now we're going to go into CurvesTransformation, which again, processes and CurvesTransformation. Yeah, here. And I don't have, like this one doesn't have specific settings that I save a copy of. I just like to have it handy so I don't have to go remember what the alphabet is up here in processes. So you're going to need that real-time preview, just like we did for histogram transformation. Otherwise, any changes you make won't show up until you hit the apply button, and that's just hard to work with. You want to be able to see what you're doing live. So first, I'm going to start with RGBK, and this is adjusting all of the channels at once. So this is kind of your general brightness control. So I'm going to kind of boost up the midtones a bit. You don't want to go crazy. So boost, and this is a kind of iterative process. Like I might do this a couple of times so that I get a nice result. So I'm going to brighten up the midtones a bit, lower the blacks a bit to kind of cut out some of that noise. Not too much, because then I lose the that dimmer nebula stuff here, and also clip the background, and we don't want to do that because then it'll look kind of fake. So leave some background in there, just cut it a little bit. Sometimes I go and adjust the highlights to kind of add some contrast.
Oh, yes. Looks so good.
And make sure you reset each time.
Reset.
Yeah. Apply and reset. Apply and let dry.
Apply and let dry.
I don't know if y'all remember that commercial or not, but
I remember.
Apply and let dry.
Dry.
I think it was for like patching leather furniture or something like that.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I think apply and let dry.
Yeah.
You won't forget.
Now, instead of adjusting red, green, and blue here to adjust the colors, I'm going to do a slightly different thing. Because like if I were to adjust the blue here, it kind of adjusts it for the whole image, and that's not what I want. I really want to bring out the blue that's just kind of here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to close this out, and we'll come back to saturation and stuff in a bit, and close the real-time preview. And this is a thing I learned recently on the Astro Imaging channel from Steve Miller for processing Hubble palette data that is equally useful here. So I'm going to go to, instead of a process, I'm going to go to a script. And I think it's under utilities, and ColorMask is the name of the script. Now, the thing with scripts is they're not like processes in that like, they operate in a different way in PixInsight. So once I have the script open, I can't do anything to the background here, just to FYI. So I have the image selected, and I'm going to open up an instance of this that I have so that I have the settings that I want. Now, when you save out a script, it actually, and when you reopen it, it's going to show you this really weird window. To actually run the script with your settings, you have to go to Apply Global, and then the script appears. So these are some settings that, well, so this will change depending on which one of these buttons you click. So there's red, green, blue, cyan, magenta, and yellow. And for this one, I think, I can't remember what did I do. I think I selected the reds. And I have chrominance mask, and I have the mask strength as 1. And layers to remove, this does a bit of blurring on the mask to kind of smooth it out. And I have it set to 4. And this just makes the mask smoother so that it applies nicer across the image. And I hit OK, and it's going to create this mask. Anywhere that's red in the image is going to go in this mask. Now it looks crunchy right now, but it's just a weird display issue. If I zoom a little bit, the smoothing happens. And yeah, so I've selected the reds. Now, red versus magenta, you might have to see, you might have to try both until you get the mask that you want. Yeah. You know, they're kind of near each other. So I'm going to minimize the mask, and I'm going to apply the mask. Not that one. This one. And I think, actually, no, I'm not inverting it because I want to attack the areas that are red in the image and protect the areas that are not red in the image, because I want to specifically adjust the tone of the red. So I've applied the mask. I go back to curves, and now I can adjust the tone of just the reds in the image. So I'm going to take this blue, and it's just going to kind of adjust the middle there and not the rest. So I want to bring some of that blue back in of the reflection kind of portion of this. So I'm just going to tweak just a little bit. I don't want to go crazy.
Ooh.
Crazy.
You knew I'd like that.
All right, so I'm going to apply that. And, you know, let's click on the green and see what happens, and just kind of.
Oh yeah, it brightens up a little. Oh yeah, I do see the kind of green. Oh wow, it's bringing out the magentas.
You know, this kind of, I like it like right about here. So it kind of softens the blue a little bit, but while still keeping the reflection portion of this. Yeah, you know, just mess around with it a bit. Just tiny, tiny little adjustments. All right, I like that. What about y'all?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and
Beautiful.
you can do that if you have Nebula with other colors and stuff. You can do that same process. Select the blues, select the greens, whatever else you want to do. So I'm going to remove that mask. And let's see, was there? No, I might go play around with the background one more time. So I'll go back to curves without the mask, preview, go to RGBK, and maybe just I drop a point here so that it won't move the mids. And I'm gonna drop. Well, I don't want to drop the darks too much because I really want to hold on to that that red nebula. So actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset. I'm going to set a point here that I kind of bring up and another point here that I kind of bring down.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, so it's really hard to kind of bring out those areas, but especially with the stars removed, it's kind of easier to start bringing them up. All right, so with that, now I'm going to go look at the star image.
Yes.
Zoom in on that a little bit. So a lot of stars in the middle are kind of blue because when StarNet removed them, a lot of the red that's in them is from the nebula, and it stayed with the nebula. So don't worry about kind of the blue of those middle stars because it'll look normal when we put it back together. But I do see that there's a lot of kind of red halos around these outer stars that are probably from the optics and using that filter. Because when you have stars that are just hydrogen and oxygen, they're just kind of red and blue. And if you have any chromatic aberration, that will show up as red and blue like we have here. So there's a way to reduce those halos so that, and unfortunately you'll kind of lose star color this way, but then your stars won't have these little halos. So there's a process called StarMask. So if you go to processes, all processes, StarMask. This is actually, you know, I'm going to wait and apply that. And actually, I don't. Let's try it here. Yeah, so StarMask. You set the noise threshold to be right about what your dimmest star is. So if you click and drag over the image with this readout mode button selected, it will tell you the brightness where your cursor is pointing. So in here, some of the dimmest stars are 0.2, 0.1, but those stars are not really the ones I care about. So I'm going to leave it at 0.3. Other settings as shown, scale of 6. This has to do with the wavelet layers again. For star detection, you want it to be pretty smooth, so smooth is a 5. And I have a thing ticked here called contours, and I'll show you what it's actually going to do. And then I have the midtones set pretty low here. So I'm going to run this. This is going to create a star mask of the edges of the stars because I have that contour selected. So if I zoom in, you can see I just have the edges of the stars here. All right, so I have this mask here. Minimize it. And I'm going to apply the mask. And you can see now that it kind of just has the edges of the stars selected here. We're going to turn that off. Now I'm going to open a process called, let's see, what's it called? Color saturation, which is again, processes, color saturation. Now what this does is it lets you selectively choose which colors to adjust the saturation for. Saturate it more or saturate it less for all the colors across the spectrum. So let's say your image just kind of has this blue cast to it. And the one way you can remove it, especially if it's in the background, is to desaturate it, but just the blues and not all the colors at the same time. So you place these points along the line, and if it's in the middle, no change. If you drop it down, these are the colors that is going to desaturate. So down is desaturate and up is saturate. Saturation is basically like how intense that color is. So like more intense is like pure that color, and less, and desaturated way down here is basically turns it black and white. So with this mask on of the halos of the stars, and this is for blue, I'm going to apply this a couple of times, and it's very subtle, but you can kind of see the blue edge of the star has kind of reduced in intensity. And then I've got another one for red, where I've got the reds over here and the reds on this side of the spectrum, desaturated, and the rest of the colors flat. And I'm going to apply it. And it doesn't really get rid of it, but it makes it less obvious.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to do another thing to the stars, but I'm going to do it after I recombine the images, when I do some star reduction. So I'm going to remove that mask, and now we're going to recombine the star mask and the starless image. So for that, we're going to use a process called pixel math. So again, process is pixel math. Pixel math gets, well, a little mathy. But you can also just do really, really basic things too. So I'm going to open up my starless image. The jargon is, so this $T, that means the current image.
Okay.
I'm going to be in the tab just for the whole RGB image. And so I do $T plus star mask. Star mask is the name of this image. So it's basically going to add this to that, just a basic add. And I hit apply, the square apply. There we go.
Oh, there it is.
Very cool.
That's cool.
Normally I would save these out, but I'm not going to this time around.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, now our image has been recombined as if we had never run StarNet at all. And you can see that there's no weird star adding artifacts really. It's good to go and check. And our halos have been reduced as we'd hoped.
Yeah, looks great.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Wow.
Now we're going to do some star
Beautiful.
reduction. And there's a lot of ways to do this. But this way I have found is really cool, and it maintains kind of the 3D quality of the image. So I'm going to go back to that star mask process, but set the noise threshold as 0.3 like we had before. The scale to 10, because we want to include the bigger stars in this, because if you have it set lower, then it will exclude some of the brighter stars. Structure growth, these settings, smoothness to be 11, and then these settings as shown. Again, I'm copying from another person here. And this is going to make some really weird looking square stars. Weird square shaped stars. And if you're still getting some target in your image, like especially if you have a galaxy, you can drop that scale to like 8 or 6 or somewhere between. The fact that it's even or odd doesn't particularly matter, I don't think. I just do it that way until that galaxy structure mostly goes away, because we'll be able to get rid of the rest of it with the next step. Of course, we don't have a galaxy here, and it works just fine. But if you do, that's how you can do that. Next, we're going to clone stamp the big stars. So kind of what we're doing here is we're making a star mask that's just going to go after the small stars to reduce their size, but not reduce the size of the large stars. And there's 2 reasons for that. One, applying star reduction to large stars can give some really weird looking edge effects, especially if you use like a Newtonian. And B, keeping the large stars as they are and reducing all the other stars kind of gives it a little more of a 3D effect. So now this image doesn't have a whole lot of really bright stars, but I'll go through and stamp some out anyway. So what a process called clone stamp, which is also really useful for getting rid of any dust spots that your flats were not able to get rid of. I set the radius to be of a size to stamp out the star. You can adjust that just by clicking on it and using your scroll wheel or setting a particular number. And I'm going to go through and so you have to, like in Photoshop, except you hit Control instead of Alt, hit Control click, and it's going to clone stamp that area onto the star. So you want to take some of that black and stamp it on the star to get rid of it. And if you had any leftover galaxy core, if you're processing a galaxy, you can just stamp that out too. Once I'm done with that, check mark to apply, and I'm gonna toggle back and forth, and you can see which stars I have stamped out.
Okay.
That's with Control Z and Control Y, by the way. All right, so I have our star mask. Now, I would like those stars to be circular again and not square. So I'm gonna apply a process called, huh?
I think that makes sense. Like,
yeah.
I was wondering where this was going.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Stars end up square just as a result of like the way that the structures of like, this is so that you don't capture any structure from the nebula or the galaxy. So the stars end up square by accident, and then you make them round again by applying convolution to the star.
Wow. Okay.
So convolution is the opposite of deconvolution, and it blurs things. So I'll zoom in here so you can kind of see that happen. These are settings from wherever I learned it from. I can't remember offhand actually. And I hit apply, and now they're a little bit more roundy. And
yeah.
Okay. Now we can apply this mask to our image. So this whole process I'm doing here is kind of an advanced process, but star reduction is something I wish I had learned a little earlier, because a lot of my images, especially that I take with camera lenses, the stars they dominate the image, especially in really star dense areas. And I didn't like those images, but now I have a way to reduce the stars that doesn't look super weird. All right, you can see with this mask applied, it's always good to double check that you have it inverted the way that you want. The stars are selected, and the background and the nebula are protected, and the larger stars are also protected, because we just want to focus on the little stars. So I'm going to turn off viewing this so we can see what we're doing. And finally, I'm going to open a process called MorphologicalTransformation, another jumble of a word.
Yeah, morphological.
Now, this is a process that can do a lot of things, and actually use it to manipulate star masks a lot, because you can make stars bigger, or not even, mainly focuses on stars, bigger or smaller, or some other weird stuff. So for this one, I select erosion, and I think these are defaults, but in case they're not, here they are. And down here in structuring element, you're going to select 5, and you're kind of making a rough kind of star shape. So basically you're going to have everything selected except for the corners. I think there's a quick button for this over here, but something like this. Now I actually tend to drop the amount to 0.75, and amount everywhere in PixInsight is, as I described earlier, kind of like in Photoshop where you can change the opacity between layers. It will combine 75% of the new image with 25% of the old image, so that you don't have too extreme of an effect. You always want your stuff to kind of be in small bits so that you don't have weird looking, fake looking images. All right, with our mask applied, I'm gonna go ahead and apply this. Now you can see our stars have gotten a little smaller.
Wow, yeah.
It's subtle. Sometimes it's less subtle than others, but you can see
Oh
here.
yeah, look at that. It definitely I think it made a huge difference.
Yeah. And I think it makes the star profile, it can kind of restore the star profile a bit, because you can see here, the stars are really bright and then drop off suddenly.
Yeah.
This will drop off more slowly. I think it gives it a nicer look. It starts like this, where it's really bright and kind of drops off suddenly. Is a characteristic of Schmidt-Cassegrains.
Yeah.
I always get this with my Schmidt-Cassegrains. It's less with refractors because they tend to have sharper stars. But this definitely really helps make my Schmidt-Cassegrain stars look a little bit nicer.
Wow, they look amazing. Ow.
Yeah, okay, so now we have this, and we could work on the contrast a bit to kind of make it pop a little more. So again, I'm kind of dipping into some of the more advanced processes now of kind of fun stuff you can do to really make your images pop. So I'm going to go to a process called HDRMultiscaleTransform, and this is again up in processes in alphabetical order. This is an essential process if you're making an HDR image. Like if you have an image of the Orion Nebula and you have very short exposures for the core that you're combining with longer exposures from the outer edges, and you do an HDR, you create an HDR image using PixInsight, where there's a lot more bit depth detail in the image that you can't see on our little 8-bit computer screens and our eyes and stuff like that. An HDRMultiscaleTransform compresses the HDR so that you can actually see the contrast. For this image, it's the single exposure time, but you can still kind of do the same thing because there's 32-bit depth of information here that we're displaying on an 8-bit screen. So there's much more information here than we can see. A lot more by information, I mean brightness levels. There's a lot more brightness levels than we can see on our computer screens. So I usually find that 7 or 8 or even sometimes 9 tends to be good for the number of layers. If you go to lower number of layers, it will compress the image a lot so that it looks kind of flat. So I find that 6 or 7 or 8 kind of make add some nice contrast to it. Different stuff from default is I have median transform selected to lightness and lightness mask. So that, because we just, the eye gets, it sees contrast just in the luminance. It doesn't really see contrast in chrominance. So we mostly want to attack the luminance here. Or the lightness, as it were.
Lady, you love HDR multiscale. I never even heard of this. She's like, I love it.
Yeah, it's like it's super awesome for like galaxies and everything too.
Yes,
I use it.
Yeah, it's most apparent with galaxies. You can sometimes get some cool results on Nebula too. Okay, so it came out a little flat, not quite what I was hoping for. So let me undo that and let's try 8. For some reason, I'm not getting as good of results as I did yesterday. So we're gonna have to go about this. Actually, I think so sometimes HDRMultiscaleTransform just doesn't really get you what you want on nebulae. One thing that can help is another one called LocalHistogramEquilization. I don't remember what settings I applied to this yesterday, so I'm just gonna try these and see where we go from there. This is just another kind of contrast enhancement process.
Oh yeah, I like that.
It's a little weird. I'm going to change the, let's see.
The radius?
I can't remember what I messed with yesterday. Let's see. Let's try 2. That's weird. I don't know. Let me dial this back a bit. Actually, yeah, I keep forgetting that this one has a real-time preview as well. This is fun. Oh, don't go too far.
Yeah.
Yeah. looks kind of nice. Okay. Let's do a few more finishing touches. Curves. If you go to the C component, that kind of, it's like vibrance versus saturation in Photoshop. Kind of mess around with it here to make the colors a little more intense. We can mess around with saturation. The cool thing with curves in PixInsight is that it's not just RGB, but also luminance, the A, B, and C components. A and B are kind of like color temperature in Photoshop. You can also adjust the hue and the saturation here too for different brightness parts of the image, which is cool. Remember, don't go too crazy on saturation. Because see people that like way oversaturate their images and it just doesn't look good. Just little adjustments. Happy little flowers, happy little trees. And this is really, you know, to the artist's style kind of a thing. I'm gonna go back to RGBK and see if I can't get a little more contrastiness out of this. It can be hard to kind of get the contrast you want. Now it's looking a little oversaturated. But yeah, keep messing with it until you're happy and then publish it. But yeah.
Looks great. Thank you.
Yeah. And I was unable to really kind of get the tadpoles to stand out very well. I think in order to get the tadpoles to really stand out, kind of like with the Eagle Nebula, you really just have to do it in narrowband in Hubble palette, because they're so close to the brightness of the nebula behind it that it can be better to differentiate it by color than by contrast, which is where Hubble palette can come into play. We could do a little more denoising here with, I think I found that applying a second round of that multiscale linear transform that we did earlier, again with another luminance mask like we did earlier, kind of helps to reduce the noise a bit. There's a lot of denoising algorithms in PixInsight. Another one is TGV denoise, which I find tends to smooth it a little too much, but again, there's a lot of settings to mess around with. You could try applying some sharpening using multiscale linear transform. Actually, I'm going to open this one instead.
The stars, they're so nice.
Yeah, I'm quite happy with that, how our star reduction worked with those.
Yeah.
You can apply some sharpening, but this, of course, can make for weird star profiles and too much sharpening. So I find that sharpening is kind of hard to do. Yeah, so there's some kind of more advanced processes for dealing with your images. You know, if I process this already looks different than the one I did yesterday. If I process it again, it'll look different, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I actually like the one that I did yesterday.
Can we see that?
Better. Yes. Oh, there it is.
Oh yeah.
Here's one I did yesterday.
More contrasty or something.
Oh yeah, because one more thing I also forgot to do. There's a script called DarkStructureEnhance.
Ooh.
This is great for galaxies, but can also do cool stuff when you have some dark nebula. And I just use the defaults. The defaults work great. And that plows through the image. And if I go back and forth, you can see that it kind of darkens the dark nebula areas a little bit.
I love that.
A little bit of extra contrast there. I think my stars came out better in the newer one versus the one I did yesterday.
Yeah, the new one, stars are perfect.
Huh, crazy. Yeah, there's so many different ways to make it look. Mine, when I did it, did it a whole different way and came out all different. So.
Yep. It's like a lot of things, you know, especially with art, for as many people as do it, there are not many ways of doing it.